Hi, welcome back to a new video, and in this one I want to spend a bit of time talking to you about why I still shoot film, or rather why I started shooting film again is perhaps more accurate. So this video was inspired by a blog post I read over at Analogue Wonderland, and in all fairness I'm not linked to Analogue Wonderland in any other way than I buy a lot of my film from there, and I tend to get most of my developing done there. But that's it. I read the post and I found it interesting reading somebody else's reasons why they shoot film, and so yeah, it's worth sharing. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk to you about why I still love to shoot film. Right, point number one, and this for me was a bit of a no-brainer. It is basically nostalgia. I'm in my 50s, so when I first picked up a camera, I was probably, I think, properly, seriously picked up camera would have been, around about the age of 18, 19, but, I'd had cameras that I'd used for family holiday snapshots and things like that before then. And back then, it was film. That's all there was. There was no other option. So I learnt about photography. I learnt about light, and I learnt about the interaction between your shutter speed and your aperture, and the available light, exposure levels and things like this. I learnt all of that on film cameras, and over the years, I dipped in and out of photography as a hobby. But when I came back to it, around about 2008, 2009, sometime around then, I went straight to digital. I'd sold all of my film cameras prior to that. I think we'd had a digital point and shoot, a Sony DSC 80 or 90, if I recall correctly. But I got rid of all of my film cameras, and last year, when I seriously started picking up the camera again, I had this inkling, because I've been reading a lot about the resurgence of film and things like this. I wanted to try and reacquire all of those cameras that I'd once owned but no longer did. So and I started with this, which I have reviewed, the Praktica MTL3, because this was, or rather a version of this was, my first ever SLR, my first ever proper camera, and one of these was where I took my basic first steps in photography. So I acquired one of these. I've acquired my BX20 back, a Nikon F601, Canon SRT101, no, that's a Minolta SRT101, Canon FTB, A1, T90, etc, etc. I've started reacquiring them, and as I started reacquiring them and using them, I kind of fell back in love with film. Don't get me wrong, I still shoot an awful lot of digital. In fact, the bulk of my shooting is digital. I tend to shoot, if you're a regular to the channel, you'll know, I tend to shoot bands and gigs and events, and you need to use digital for that, for the mainstay, so that's what I use. But I will now often take a film camera along with me, and I just carry a film camera around as part of my everyday carry camera. I've got a digital one and I've got a film one. So that nostalgia factor was a big reason that got me back into shooting film, and in all honesty, I fell back in love with it again once I started doing that. Reason number two, there is a look and feel to film photography, even if you are shooting it, getting your negs developed or developing them yourselves, and then digitally scanning them, and using I use Negative Lab Pro to convert them into positives, etc. Even if you go down that route, there is a look and feel to film photography that is not possible with digital, and I don't care what anybody says. My personal view is it is not possible to recreate that truly with a digital sensor. You can emulate it to a degree, and I've got cameras that under the right circumstances I feel emulate a film look, but it's still a digital image, and there are certain things about it that still show it as being a digital image. The main one of those for me is the dynamic range of it. Dynamic range is the key thing in film. Even slide film, it is much narrower than the best, latest digital cameras, and even digital cameras from, you know, almost a decade ago have a higher dynamic range than you are ever going to get on film, particularly if you're shooting negative film, be it black and white or colour. You're just not going to get it. And a lot of the emulations, I personally feel, get it extremely wrong. I see so many film emulations and videos about how to get a film look. Here's a nostalgic film look, and in most cases it's just low levels of contrast and low levels of saturation. That's not an emulation of a film look, that's an emulation of poor quality printing that tended to exist, particularly mass consumer printing of film back in the 80s and the 90s. It is perfectly possible, and it's always been perfectly possible, to get good saturation and good contrast out of film. That's never been anything but true. You can look at work that was shot on film as far back as the 30s, the 20s, and you can see good levels of contrast in there. You can see good levels of colour from negative film, you know, from the 60s and 70s onwards. So that's people recreating a look they see when they actually look at their family snapshots from that time period, because that's what the prints look like. That's not what they had to look like. So you can get decent contrast in particular, you can get decent saturation out of print film. It's perfectly possible, and film in general. But there's still something about the look of it, the structure of the grain, the reduced dynamic range, that I personally think can't be completely replicated with digital. It's not the only reason I shoot film, but it is one of the reasons. I think the look is unique. You can emulate it, but you can't 100% replicate it. Right, on to reason number 3, and that is that it slows me down. Now, don't get me wrong, as I say, I predominantly use my digital gear when I'm shooting gigs, and I'm quite thankful of that, to be perfectly honest with you. I shot a gig last night, couple of bands, and I probably shot in total around about 600-700 images over the course of the 2 sets. So, you know, 350 to 400 images per set, high-speed burst modes at times when, you know, people are moving around, things like this, and that's absolutely great. There's no way I could afford, either in the past or now, to shoot that much film and develop it. It would just be ridiculous. So, you know, having that in that situation is great. But there are times when I want to slow down, when I want to be more contemplative about the work that I'm doing. And you can do that with a digital camera, but we don't tend to. And I am using the royal we there, I suppose. I don't tend to as much. But With a film camera, you do. You can't see a preview on the back of it, so you do tend to stop and think more about, have I got the exposure right? What is going on in the scene? Do I need to, correct for the backlighting, and to what degree do I need to correct for it? So you do stop and think more about it, because you've got, at most 36-ish shots under your belt here that you can use, so it does slow you down. And then there's that factor that, even if you're developing it yourself, you've still got to bring it home and develop it. If you're not developing it yourself, you've got to send it off, get it developed and get it back. Not many people have 1 hour or 24-hour photo processing available to them in this day and age, unless they're doing it themselves or they happen to work in a film lab. So, we are waiting days to get the results back. So there is something about that mindful approach to photography that I find film brings. The only thing I've found that comes close to it, to a tiny degree, is where you've got older digital cameras and you're shooting raw, and it takes 30-40 seconds to render a raw file and write it, and in some cameras you can't do anything else while that's occurring. But you can still then preview it, and you can still get home and plug it into your computer, so it's still not the same. And the mindfulness that you get from shooting film, and that unknown that you get until you get the negatives back and you've scanned them, and you see what the end result is, there is something special to me about that. Okay, on to number 4, and this is a little bit of an unusual one, because what I'm going to talk about is the range of film that's available. But I do need, I feel, to caveat that slightly, because the actual number of different actual types of film, as in a unique version of a film, is probably lower now than it was at film's heyday. But a lot of those were just slight variations on a single core film. And if you wanted something that was a bit experimental, it really didn't exist. What you tended to have was film that fell into 2 very broad categories. Even if you're talking about black and white, slide, or negative here, you had film that was made to be cheap and cheerful. Mass consumer film that was very often all coming from 1 or 2 different production facilities and being rebranded to go out through your photo processing lab, your chemist, your supermarket, your mail order print houses, these kind of things. And that was normally 200 ASA film that was basically mass produced. You shot the film, you sent it off, you got a rollback freebie because it was included in the price. Most of the time 24 exposures, or you could pay a premium and upgrade to a 36 exposure roll. So that was where one very hefty bulk of film lies. You did, towards the top end of that, have some better consumer films around at that point, the likes of your Kodak Gold, some of the Fuji film stocks, some of the Agfa stuff, etc. And then at the black and white types there, you had your mass spoolings of cheap college type stuff that again came from similar outlets. And then you had the professional film stocks. For serious amateurs or professionals, that was available in a much wider range of film speeds, but were variants off of each other. What you would never have found back then is something like that. Harman Phoenix. This in the 70s, 80s, 90s, this would never have seen the light of day. We would never have seen a film stock like this because it would be considered too poor quality to be released. What we're looking at here is effectively an experimental film. And, you know, it's joined by the likes of things like, you know, this is Lomography Metropolis. And we've got another Lomography one here, which is their 92, low saturation film. And these are the kind of things I'm talking about when I'm talking about range of film that we have available to us now. There is so much weird and wonderful experimental film about. Yes, some of it costs a stupid amount of money, but it is there. You know, we can go out and buy quite easily one ASA film and shoot it if we want. We can find, you know, respooled cinema film easily and shoot that. We've got all of these weird and wacky films available to us, as well as some of the core classic films that have never really gone away. Some of them have, which is a shame, you know. Actual proper Fuji from Fuji I would dearly love to have again, but it doesn't look like we're going to. But we have such a breadth of film types available to us now that I absolutely love it, because most of these, please take it from me, I was a film shooter back in this time period. Most of these would never have existed. They would have never been able to come to market back then, because the volume sales of them just wouldn't have existed, so you wouldn't have it. So do take that on board. We are living in one way, a little bit of a golden age of film, and I think a lot of people either don't realise or forget that, and it is, for me, a core point. Okay, on to my final reason for shooting film, and I've kind of touched on it earlier, but I wanted to revisit it because for me it is a very important point, and it comes back to that slowing you down, that mindfulness, that change of pace, and the point I mentioned that you take a shot and you do not know if it's worked or not. So as a result, you have to wait for the film to come back, for you to scan it or to get the scans back or whatever, but you've got that delay before you know whether you've got something good or not. You know, I will occasionally, I try not to when I'm shooting digitally because of time and wanting to keep an eye on the band or the event in question. I'll occasionally look and have a quick preview, very often between sets, at what I've shot, and occasionally a shot will stand out. It happened last night and it was kind of like, oh, that's good, and I'm already contemplating how I'm going to edit it and what I'm going to do with it. You know, that is immediate feedback. You do not have that with film. You hope that what you envisaged the shot to be is something that you can then bring to reality. But you have to wait days for it, and as a result, it's always, for me anyway, a really pleasant surprise when I get it back and actually it transpires as it did, or it didn't, and I have to try and remember what I was doing and why it didn't work. But it is always really nice, and I really do like it when you get that feeling. And for me, it's one of those intangibles around film and film photography that you cannot replicate with digital in the same way, and I really, really like that. Okay, so yeah, those are my 5, completely arbitrary number by the way, 5 reasons why I started shooting film again and continue to love shooting film. If you've got your own reasons, if you do shoot film, please feel free to put them down in the comments below. I really would love to hear from you if you shoot film, why you still do it, and whether you love it or not. You may well hate it, I don't know. Let me know down in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, please do hit the like button. And if you want to see more content like this, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified when new videos get uploaded. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. Take care. Bye.